The midnight train from Blackstone City was never quiet. Merchants argued over money, workers drank cheap coffee to survive the long ride, and exhausted travelers tried to sleep through the noise. But on this particular night, the atmosphere felt different. Heavy, suffocating. The reason sat alone in seat 27. Damian Volkov. Even his name carried fear. People whispered stories about him in bars, police stations, and dark alleyways. Some claimed he built his empire before turning 30. Others believed he once made an entire gang disappear overnight after they betrayed him. Nobody knew which stories were true anymore because with Damian, truth and myth had become the same thing. The moment he entered the train, conversations died. A mother pulled her child closer. Two businessmen quietly changed compartments. Even the conductor avoided direct eye contact while scanning Damian's ticket. His reputation traveled faster than he did. Damian leaned against the window silently, staring into the darkness outside. The city lights slowly disappeared behind the train as forests and snow-covered hills replaced them. His expensive black coat hid most of his body, but not the injury beneath it. Blood slowly soaked through the fabric near his ribs. Hours earlier, an assassination attempt had nearly ended his life. One of his own men had betrayed him during a meeting at the docks. Bullets exploded through the warehouse. Smoke filled the air. Damian survived only because he fought his way out with brutal efficiency. But the wound was deep, and blood loss was beginning to weaken him. Still, he refused to show pain. Men like Damian survived because they never appeared vulnerable. Across the carriage, passengers secretly watched him through reflections in the windows. Nobody dared approach him. Fear controlled every movement inside that train. Then the doors opened at the next station. A freezing gust of wind swept through the cabin as a young woman stepped inside carrying a small woven basket. She looked completely out of place among the wealthy travelers and nervous city workers. Her clothes were simple. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. A faded green scarf wrapped around her neck. Her name was Elena. She came from a tiny countryside village far from Blackstone City. She sold medicinal herbs and homemade remedies in local markets to help support her grandmother. Life had taught her kindness before caution. As she searched for a seat, her eyes scanned the crowded carriage until they landed on Damian. Most people noticed the danger in him first. She noticed the pain. Elena paused. A thin line of blood had reached the floor beneath his seat. The passengers around her quickly looked away, silently warning her not to get involved. One older man even shook his head nervously. But Elena ignored them. She slowly walked toward Damian. Every passenger stared in disbelief. When she stopped beside him, Damian finally looked up. His cold gray eyes locked onto hers with dangerous intensity. "Seats taken," he said quietly. Elena glanced around the train. There were no empty places left. "I don't mind sharing," she replied softly. The courage in her voice surprised him. People usually trembled around Damian. This girl didn't. She sat beside him carefully, placing her basket on her lap. For several moments, silence filled the space between them. The rhythmic sound of train tracks echoed beneath the tension. Then Elena noticed fresh blood spreading through his coat. "You're hurt," she whispered. Damian's jaw tightened instantly. "Mind your business." But Elena wasn't intimidated. "My grandmother always said untreated wounds become dangerous faster than bad people do." For the first time in years, Damian almost smiled. Almost. He studied her face carefully. No fear. No manipulation. No hidden motive. Just genuine concern. That made her more dangerous than anyone else on the train. Because kindness was something Damian no longer understood. And, deep down, part of him wanted to. The train continued deeper into the mountains while silence lingered between Damian and Elena. Outside, snowstorms painted the windows white. Inside, tension wrapped around every passenger like invisible chains. Damian kept expecting the girl to move away. Most people couldn't even sit near him for more than a few minutes. Fear eventually drove them elsewhere. But Elena remained calm, occasionally glancing toward the blood soaking through his coat. Finally, she spoke again. "You're losing too much blood." Damian exhaled slowly, irritated by her persistence. "You should stop worrying about strangers." Elena tilted her head slightly. You don't feel like a stranger. The answer caught him off guard. For years, Damien had built his identity around fear. People saw him as a monster before they saw him as human. It was safer that way. Distance protected him. Fear controlled others. But this girl looked at him differently, and he didn't know what to do with that. Another sharp pain hit his side. Damien clenched his jaw hard enough to crack stone. Elena noticed immediately. Without asking permission, she opened her basket. Several passengers nearby watched nervously as she removed small cloth wraps filled with dried herbs and medicine bottles. Damien's voice turned cold. What are you doing? Healing you. I didn't ask for help. Good thing kindness doesn't require permission. For a brief second, the corner of Damien's mouth twitched again. Elena carefully reached toward his coat. Instinctively, Damien grabbed her wrist with lightning speed. The movement was so sudden nearby passengers gasped. His grip was powerful, dangerous. But Elena didn't panic. Instead, she simply looked into his eyes and quietly said, "If you wanted to hurt me, you already would have." Something inside Damien shifted. Slowly, he released her hand. Elena opened his coat carefully and revealed the wound beneath. Even she struggled to hide her reaction. The injury was severe. A bullet had grazed near his ribs, leaving torn flesh and dried blood. You should be in a hospital, she whispered. Hospitals ask questions. And I'm guessing you dislike questions. That makes two of us. Elena cleaned the wound gently using warm water from her flask. Damien remained still, though every touch sent strange, unfamiliar feelings through him. Not desire. Not weakness. Peace. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years. As she worked, the train suddenly jolted violently. Elena lost balance and nearly fell, but Damien caught her instantly, pulling her against him. For a moment, time stopped. Her soft breath. His heartbeat. Snow falling outside the windows. Their faces only inches apart. Passengers stared in disbelief at the terrifying Mafia boss carefully protecting a country girl like she was something fragile. Elena slowly pulled away, cheeks flushed red. Thank you, she whispered. Damien cleared his throat and looked away first. That surprised him more than anything else. Hours passed as they talked quietly while most passengers slept. Elena spoke about her village, the flower fields behind her grandmother's home, and how she dreamed of opening a small clinic someday. Damien listened carefully. Nobody ever spoke to him like this. Not because they wanted money. Not because they feared him. Just because they enjoyed his company. When Elena finally asked about his life, Damien's expression darkened. There's nothing worth hearing. I don't believe that. You should. She studied him silently before replying. Bad people don't protect strangers during train accidents. Damien frowned slightly. You noticed that? You moved before anyone else did. He had. Instinctively. Without thinking. That realization bothered him. Because Elena was beginning to see pieces of the man buried beneath the monster everyone feared. And Damien wasn't sure he wanted to be found. By dawn, the storm outside had grown worse. The train slowed as icy winds battered the tracks ahead. Passengers complained nervously while conductors moved through the cabins, checking safety conditions. But inside Damien's compartment, a strange calm existed between two people who should never have met. Elena had fallen asleep beside him. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder while the train rattled through the mountains. Damien remained perfectly still, unwilling to wake her. For years, violence defined his world. Gunfire. Betrayal. Fear. Yet somehow this simple moment felt more dangerous than all of it. Because peace made people weak. And Damien could not afford weakness. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. One message. We found you. Damien's eyes darkened instantly. The assassination attempt wasn't over. He carefully looked around the carriage. 3 unfamiliar men had boarded during the night. Heavy coats. Hidden weapons. Eyes scanning constantly. Killers. Damien subtly adjusted his posture, without waking Elena. His injured side still burned painfully, but survival instincts sharpened every sense. One of the men finally noticed him. Their eyes locked. The assassin slowly reached inside his coat. Damien moved first. He grabbed Elena and pulled her down just as a gunshot exploded through the carriage window. Passengers screamed instantly. Chaos erupted across the train. The assassins rushed forward. Damien shoved Elena behind a seat. "Stay down." Another bullet shattered overhead lights, throwing the compartment into flashing darkness. Damien attacked with terrifying speed despite his injury. Years of brutality transformed him into something almost unstoppable. One attacker lunged forward. Damien disarmed him instantly and slammed him against the train wall hard enough to crack wood. Another came from behind, but Damien countered violently before stealing the weapon. Passengers crawled across the floor screaming in terror. Elena watched everything in shock. Not because Damien was violent, but because every movement protected innocent people first. The final assassin aimed directly toward Elena. Damien reacted without hesitation. The gunshot echoed through the train. Then silence. Damien staggered backward slowly. Blood spread across his chest. He had taken the bullet for her. "Damien!" Elena screamed. The remaining attackers escaped into another compartment as conductors locked emergency doors. Panic spread everywhere, but Elena focused only on Damien collapsing beside the seats. For the first time, fear entered her eyes. Real fear. Not of him. For him. She pressed trembling hands against the wound while Damien struggled to breathe. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered desperately. Damien looked at her weakly. "They were aiming at you. Why would you protect me?" He stared at her for several seconds before answering quietly. "Because you looked at me like I was still human." The words shattered something inside Elena. This feared Mafia boss, the man the entire city treated like a monster, had risked his life for one act of kindness. Outside, emergency alarms echoed through the storm. Inside, Elena held Damien tightly while blood stained her hands. And for the first time in many years, Damien Volkov was terrified. Not of dying, of losing someone he had only just found. The train finally stopped at a remote mountain station buried beneath snow and fog. Emergency responders rushed aboard, while frightened passengers escaped into the freezing morning air. Rumors spread instantly among the crowd. The Mafia boss had saved everyone.
Nobody knew how to process that.
Damien was carried into the small station clinic, barely conscious. Elena refused to leave his side. Doctors worked quickly to remove the bullet while police officers surrounded the building outside. Because no matter what heroic act Damien performed, the law still considered him one of the most dangerous men alive. Hours later, Elena sat quietly beside his bed while snow drifted beyond the windows. Damien finally opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was her. "You stayed," he whispered. Elena looked exhausted but relieved. "You took a bullet for me. Leaving would have been rude." A weak laugh escaped him. That sound surprised both of them. Damien slowly sat up despite the pain. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt different now.
Softer. Honest.
Finally, Elena asked the question nobody else dared ask. "How did you become this person?" Damien stared toward the snowfall outside. "When I was 12, my father owed money to dangerous men." His voice remained calm, but pain hid beneath every word. "They came to our house one night. I watched them beat him to death while my mother begged for mercy." Elena's expression slowly fell. "The police did nothing. Nobody cared. So I learned early that power is the only thing this world respects." Over the years, Damien climbed through the criminal underworld by becoming colder than everyone around him. Mercy disappeared. Trust disappeared. Eventually, fear became his greatest weapon. But somewhere along the way, Damien admitted quietly, "I stopped remembering who I used to be." Elena reached for his hand gently. "You're still that person."
No.
"That boy died years ago." "I don't believe that." Damien looked at her carefully. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Her words carried dangerous sincerity. Outside the clinic, black vehicles suddenly arrived through the snow. Damien's men. At the same time, police officers prepared weapons nearby. Tension exploded instantly across the station. Elena looked nervous. Damien stood slowly despite his injuries. "This is my world," he said quietly, "and it destroys everything it touches." One of his men entered the clinic urgently. "We need to leave now. More enemies are coming." Damien nodded once before turning toward Elena. For several painful seconds, neither moved. Then Damien removed a silver necklace from his pocket and placed it gently into her hand. "My mother gave me this before she died." Elena's eyes widened. "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because if I stay near you, eventually they'll hurt you to reach me." The realization hit her like ice. Damien cared enough to walk away. But before he could leave, Elena grabbed his arm. "You don't get to decide my choices for me." The room fell silent. Even Damien looked stunned. "I'm not afraid of your world," she continued softly. "I'm afraid of what happens if you keep believing you belong in darkness forever." For the first time in years, Damien
Night fell
Volkov
once
had no
again
response
over the mountains.
because this country
Snow
girl from
continued
nowhere
drifting across
had
the
just
station
challenged
while
the
danger
one
closed
thing
in
he never
from
questioned,
every direction.
himself. Damien's enemies had tracked him to the area, and police forces were preparing raids nearby. Violence was inevitable, but inside the quiet clinic room, something stronger than fear was growing. Hope. Damien stood near the window watching armed men move outside. For most of his life, he believed survival required becoming merciless. Love was weakness. Attachment created vulnerability. Then Elena entered his life and destroyed every rule he lived by. She approached him slowly. "You're thinking about leaving again." Damien didn't deny it. "If I stay, people die." Elena shook her head gently. "People already die in your world because nobody ever taught you another way to live." Her words cut deeper than bullets. Damien turned toward her. "You think kindness changes men like me?" "No," Elena answered honestly. "But being seen changes people." Silence filled the room again. Damien walked closer until only inches separated them. "All my life," he admitted quietly, "people feared me before they even spoke to me." Elena touched the scar near his face carefully. "I saw the pain first. Something finally broke inside him then. Not weakness. Not surrender. The walls. The endless walls Damien spent years building around himself." Outside, gunfire suddenly erupted near the station entrance. His enemies had arrived sooner than expected. Damien instantly reached for his weapon, but Elena grabbed his hand first. "Don't disappear into that darkness again. I may not have a choice. You do now." Those 4 words changed everything. For the first time in his life, Damien fought for something beyond power and survival. He fought for a future. The station became chaos as rival gunmen stormed through the snow. Damien moved strategically, protecting civilians while his men secured exits. Police officers watched in disbelief as the feared Mafia boss prioritized innocent lives over escape routes. Eventually, the attackers were defeated. And when silence finally returned to the mountains, something remarkable happened. Damien surrendered. Not because he lost. Because he was tired. Tired of violence. Tired of fear. Tired of becoming the monster everyone expected him to be. Months later, Blackstone City struggled to understand the news. Damien Volkov had cooperated with authorities, dismantled criminal networks, and vanished from the underworld completely. Many believed it was impossible. But Elena knew the truth. Even broken souls can change when someone reminds them they're still human. Far away from the city, near rolling flower fields and quiet hills, a small countryside clinic opened its doors for the first time. Villagers filled the waiting room while sunlight poured through open windows. And beside Elena stood Damien. No black suits. No weapons. No fear.
Just peace.
As he watched her laugh with children near the garden outside, Damien realized something extraordinary. The most dangerous thing he ever faced wasn't bullets or enemies. It was being loved honestly. And somehow that saved him.